Chapter 176 Words with the White Wizard. I always expect to get knocked out when evolving, but this feels slightly different. I don't feel like I'm being pulled downward into slumber, but quite literally being pulled downward. I can feel my consciousness being pulled down into my core, dragged away from its home in my ant body in a non-pain-free process. What the heck is going on here? I was just about to evolve and enjoy my rise to triumph. What the heck is this? Is this some punishment for hitting Tiny too much? He deserved it. I swear. Did I kill too many humans? Is their god going to take punishment on me for reaping juicy experience from them? Those were bad people. Probably. To tell you the truth, I don't know. Despite my protestations and desperate flailing with my mind, I have absolutely no control. Like a water balloon held in an iron fist, my mind can only slosh about as it is inexorable pulled away, into the core, and then down, further down. A tiny thread-like tendril has extended from the dark and connected to my core, and it's through this thread that I am drawn, dragged even. Like Alice tumbling down a rabbit hole, I can sense myself sinking down a winding path, twisting here, turning there, and always spiraling further downward, to the very center. Of what I have no freaking clue. As a disembodied mind, I don't really have access to a whole lot of sensory options. None is the precise number now that I think about it. I think Vibrant would die of sheer boredom in this place. Not to mention Tiny, he'd have nothing to fight. Or eat. Krenis would probably be quite fine though, now that I consider it. She'd miss the sensation of touch obviously, but she's used to going without the others. I continue to babble to myself on the surface level of my mind, mainly to distract from the sheer existential terror I'm experiencing. I'm freaking out over here. It isn't often your consciousness is quite literally dragged out of your body and pulled to a new location whilst you spin, completely blind and unaware of the process going on. How often could that possibly happen to a person? It's only the second time I've ever experienced this sensation. The realization stills my pounding mental heart. For a single second. Actually, I did go through this whole thing before once, didn't I? I can remember, vaguely, what it felt like when I died, I guess. I could feel my mind slipping away from my body, pulled out and dragged through who knows what to who knows where. The hunger and sensation from my old body just faded away, then everything went white, and then you heard a voice which welcomed you to your new world. Yeah, then Gandalf spoke to me and everything got started on this crazy ant venture. Gandalf. Is that what you call me, young one? Well, yeah, that is certainly the voice of the Gandalf the Grey, and I'll say the same even if you don't let me pass. Pass where? Doesn't matter, I suppose. What's going on here exactly, oh bearded one? Could I perhaps be returned to my body, please? Your core has reached the level of density required for me to reach out to you in this way, young Anthony. It is kind of traditional that I speak to those like you personally at this point of their new journey. Don't you talk to me almost constantly? Every time I level up and so on. Those communications are a little more subconscious. For me to reach out to you with my active mind requires a little more sturdiness on your part. You have reached this point very quickly, I must say. You must have adapted to the monstrous life well. That sturdiness comment is a little disturbing. I reached this point quickly. Compared to what? The other people like me. Just how many people do you drag in here, Gandalf? Are you in the habit of abducting people? Can I go away now? Please. I reach out to grasp an existence like yours and bring them into this world periodically. It helps. Various things. What do you mean? Like me? I don't recall there being anything particularly special about me. Oh, you don't? I have found it takes a certain resilience of mind, a certain insanity, to allow a sentient creature such as a human to survive the transition to life in the dungeon of this world without breaking. I try to find souls such as yours, souls that have lived a life of deprivation and suffering. I find they are better equipped to handle the madness, slaughter and solitary life of a monster. But I don't particularly see myself as having suffered a horrible life or anything though. It was bit tough sometimes, but everybody hurts, you know. There is a slight stunned silence between the two of us for a moment. You starved to death at age 15. Well, yeah, I know that, right. But I always thought that was a bit more common than people gave it credit, you know. People starve to death all over the world, many of them younger than me. That's not so bad. I'm not sure that Gandalf was quite expecting the response he is getting. Weren't you also abandoned by your parents? I wouldn't necessarily say abandoned. They did disappear one morning with all of their clothes and any belongings that were worth anything. Not to mention my relatives immediately stopped answering my calls, leaving me stranded with debtors on the door. But hey, could have been worse. Could have been worse. Sure. Could have had my leg cut off. Dot dot dot. Dot dot dot. Didn't that happen too? Well, a bit. A bit. Fine. Sheesh. So what? I still had my pets at least. Ah yes, your pet colony of ants. You fed them everything you had, didn't you? Until you starved to death. Can we stop talking about the death and such? I'm more of a forward-looking person. Would you describe it as sane for a person to feed a colony of ants above themselves to the point they died from it? Not everyone has my sense of responsibility and devotion, Gandalf. What can I say? That is the reason I reincarnated you as an ant. By the way, I thought it would be a comforting form for you. So it really was pet ants equals ant rebirth. Damn it. You don't like it. Dot 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 dot. It worked out okay in the end, but I have to say, Gandalf, it was quite a shaky start. Yes, many don't make it past the first few days, despite my best efforts. So, what happens to those who don't make it? Death, of course. Dot 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 dot. Yikes. I hope you can continue to succeed, young Anthony. Who knows, perhaps I'll see you in person one day. In person. Like, you're not a spirit or something. Where the heck are you? If you go down far enough, you should find me. I just might, you know. Not in a million years. You may not have a choice. Good luck. With that, I feel my mind once again being manipulated by a power beyond its control, flung back out of wherever the heck I've been and up through the tendril and slammed back into my core. Ouch. From my core I can feel my consciousness once again settle inside its rightful house. Before I can even begin to process the bizarre conversation with he of the floppy hat, I sink slowly into sleep as the evolution process takes hold of me properly. Dangy. Chapter 177, The Low Rider. Gradually my mind begins to resurface. It's a strange feeling, seeing as I don't actually get to sleep as an ant but rather going into the stasis-like rest of torpor, so I'm not actually used to properly blacking out like this. The memory of what had taken place when I evolved still boils away in my mind. Gandalf. Is he actually down in the dungeon somewhere? I push away the bad memories of my previous life that had been dragged up during the conversation. I don't waste time focusing on that stuff. I have plenty to be about in the here and now after all. I've got a new family, pets and a brand new mother to look after. No point stuffing about thinking of things that are long gone. Sensations bubble up in my awareness until the light comes on in my eyes and then bam, I'm awake. Ha, hoogaba. I'm here. I'm ready. It's action stations, people. Dot 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 dot. Why is my face full of fluff? Flexing my legs and body, I can feel all of the familiar appendages are in their proper places. 6 legs, 2 antennae, the junk in my trunk. All seems good. The real problem I have is all this damn fuzz in my face. What the heck is going on? Tiny. Opening square bracket dot 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 closing square bracket. Tiny, is that you? Opening square bracket dot 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 closing square bracket. Get the hell up, Tiny. I need to move about in here. Opening square bracket dot 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 dot. Sleepy. Go sleep on the surface or something. I can't even see with all this fuzz in my eyes. Opening square bracket dot 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 dot. Tired. That's the same thing as sleepy. Get the heck out of here, you lump. I can sense an exasperated sigh over the mental link, as if I'm the one being unreasonable. Just who does this ape think he is? And why the heck is he so damn fluffy now? Gradually the fuzz begins to shift and move and I can gradually see a little better. A wall of long white fuzzy hair rolls away from me towards the entrance where I can hear grunting punctuated by frustrated growls. Dot dot dot. Do you not fit? Opening square bracket dot 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 dot. No. Dang it. I shouldn't be too surprised since the entrance and chamber was a little squeezy before he evolved. Knowing Tiny and his general species, I can only assume that he has gotten even more powerful and large after evolving. If I'd thought ahead properly, I would have realized this would happen and made proper preparations. You'll have to dig your way out, buddy. Try digging straight out that way and you should come out the side of the hill, near the top. Our chamber is usually dug the closest to the top and off to the side somewhere, out of the way of the rest of the colony, so there shouldn't be a problem if he starts digging his way through. Even if the side of the hill collapses, it won't take down any chambers others than ours and we can dig out easily enough. I hear a deep scraping as the ape starts to dig his way out. The only visible evidence I have of that is the shifting white hair pressed into my face. Eventually he finally breaks through. Grunting happily to himself, he hauls himself out into the light, and I finally get a good look at his new size as he moves. He's big. That's a big ape. He was already large enough to put any Earth-sized gorilla to shame, but he must have increased in size by 30% with this evolution. If he were to stand up to his maximum height, he'd probably crack 10 feet, easy. His thick, powerful arms are covered in long white hairs. The shorter hair on his torso is also mostly white. On closer inspection, he isn't pure snow white like a polar bear, more of a burnished silvery color. Is he a silverback now? What species are you now, Tiny? Do you remember? Out on the side of the hill now and basking in the sunshine, Tiny turns to look at me, and I can see his bat face is now completely black, rather than the dark gray it used to be. His eyes, however, are a deep glowing red. Opening square bracket ... closing square bracket. Your species. What kind of monster are you now? Do you know it all, bud? He stares at me blankly. Did your cunning actually go down? Opening square bracket ... closing square bracket. Holy moly. Just how muscle-brained is this guy going to get as he keeps evolving? If he gets any dumber than this, he'll forget how to eat. Looking at his bulky form that practically radiates strength, I can only imagine how potent those massive fists have become now. This species clearly prioritizes physical strength above all else, even having a brain. In some ways he makes the perfect pet, but I wish he had a bit more going on in the upstairs department. I want him to be able to have independent thoughts and be able to think for himself, rather than rely on me to point him in the right direction and make sure he has what he needs. Ah well, maybe I can do something about that down the line. Now that I have a little more space in the chamber, as well as a snazzy new natural lighting, I can get a handle on what is going on in the room. Where is Vibrant? She doesn't seem to be over in her corner, so she must have woken up by now. Where is she? Vibrant. I call. Hi hi. I hear her chirpy response. ... Did that come from? Using my antennae, I feel around on the top of my head, and sure enough, something is there. Shifting my head position back a little, I can clearly see her beady little ant eyes staring back at me. She looks almost exactly the same. Wait, have you evolved, Vibrant? Yup. Dang. Do you remember what species you chose? I grayed out. Of course. Vibrant took one of the special options, just like Senior said. Superior hatchling worker, she declares proudly. So still a hatchling. I slump to the ground, defeated. I'm going to have to put up with this helpless little freeloader until she reaches level 10, then craft another special core for her, then maybe she'll become useful after that. Ha. Oh well. No use crying over spilt something. I can see that Krenis is still in place, nestled onto my midsection between the joints where my legs attach to my carapace. How are you, Krenis? Ready to go and get large? Ready, master, she replies. Was your evolution successful? It was. Some very nice bonuses picked up this time. You don't seem to have changed much that I can tell, master, she says, extending a few little tentacles to pat about my carapace, probably checking my size. All of the changes took place on the inside this time. And they weren't small either. I boast. Wait and see what I can do now. I look forward to it, master. I can already feel the difference within me. My mind is positively humming with strength, like a sports car sitting in neutral, just revving and ready to go. I can feel my sub-brains sitting idly inside me. Each of them are more powerful than the single one I had before, and I now have the ability to harness them together, get them to act in concert on a single task. I can't wait to flex this new mental muscle. Let's try it. Mana. Transform. Eagerly I direct my new mental rig to attempt the never-before-achieved mana transformation. This process is so difficult that I honestly have no idea how any human is actually able to achieve it at all, let alone in a fight. First I need to bring the mana out of my core, directing it into threads that I begin to weave and shape into a mind-bending construction that I'm beginning to suspect goes a little beyond the 3 dimensions I'm familiar with. Intricate whoops and whirls that curve back and in on themselves before fine filigree patterns are weaved on the outside and on the inside of almost the entire thing. I get a headache just picturing the stupid thing. At least, I did. Muaha. Mwah. Muahahaha. Yes. Throwing the bulk of the work over to my sub-brains, I can feel them thrum into life as they take the strain of directing and shaping the mana. The cortex acts like a foreman, directing the efforts of the 2 brains to ensure they don't overlap and their independent efforts slot together like clockwork. I can feel the sub-brains straining under the load of directing the wispy threads of energy, but they are far more capable than the old sub-brain was. Not only is their mental strength beefier, but they have an upgraded amount of willpower, giving them a bit more grunt. What this does is free up my main mind to patch up the gaps. Keeping the whole picture on my mind as I leap in and patch up wherever I notice a deviation or a particularly tricky bit that the sub-brains can't quite handle on their own. Gradually, over a few minutes, the mind magic transformation construct begins to take shape and excitement rises in my heart. It might actually happen this time. Chapter 178, Mind at Work. Nearly there. This construct has defeated me over and over again. To the point that this glittering shape of mana is literally burned into the insides of my eyelids. Except that I don't have eyelids. Not the point. With every passing second, the shape begins to come together, weaved out of threads of light. It shines brilliantly inside my mind. Finally. Crunch. Ah heck. In my eagerness, I slip in my control and one of the threads gets shunted out of place. Which, of course, causes the entire thing to collapse in on itself and dissipate into nothing. Gah. Undone by my own eagerness and joy at success. This is the cruel irony of the world at play and not entirely my fault. Okay, it is. I can almost feel the smoldering resentment from my own sub-brains, irritated that I ruined their work. What the heck? You don't get to be mad at me, damn it. I'll make you guys transform mana on your own until you melt into sludge. That's right. That's who's in charge. Putting aside this failure, I'm still feeling extremely positive. I'd never been that close to succeeded in that notorious transformation before, and now I almost nailed it on my first attempt. With diligent practice, I'm sure I'll be able to succeed. If I can manage the mind mana transformation, then I can surely succeed with the simple ones. It seems this evolution was a wild success. The next thing I'm keen to try is working on the cores. If I can practice the core engineering skill at a faster rate, then I'll be massively pleased. Rushing over to the cores, I roll one out with my mandibles and crack right in. Core engineering. My mind sink down into the little core in front of me, and the nebulous energies that contain the information, the mana DNA, of the monster rise in my mind. Now for the tricky bit. Bringing the force of my mind to bear and calling upon the reserves that are my sub-brains for assistance, I begin to force and hold the changes to the information in the core. What I find almost immediately is, it's so much easier. First of all, forcing the change is a breeze with all the power I have humming inside my head. Then locking into place is so much easier that I'm able to task my sub-brains with that and then move on to the next change immediately. This is going to increase the speed of my skill training immensely. Happily, I continue to shove around the values in the core, making large stat changes sometimes and then going in and making finer adjustments to the body shape, muscle density, even the brain matter. As usual, the process becomes more and more difficult the further away from the original state of the core we get. But with my newfound mental strength, I can push it so much further than before, reaping more XP from every core that I start to work on. I could almost cry. This is everything I wished for. Now my core engineering skills will be able to go to the next level. Once I hit the wall with the first core, I push it to one side and then take a brief rest. If I alternate resting and working, I'll be able to work for longer and grind my skills more efficiently. Even with my extra brain power, this rule will hold true. After a minute or two, I shift over to the next core and then the next. On it goes until the fatigue starts to mount up, but I push through until my mind is entering the familiar braindead zone that I spent so much of the last few days in. Core engineering has reached level 8. Ha, yes. 2 whole levels from grinding today. It took me hours of effort, but on the other hand, with my new brain rig, I'm able to make more changes to each core, and work for a longer period of time, before I fall flat and run out of energy. This is a huge boost, and gaining 2 levels in one go is evidence of the kind of power my new brain is packing. 2 more and I'll be able to morph it into the next level of the skill. I cannot wait. Literally, I can't. I know Tiny is hungry and Vibrant is bored. I think she's run off somewhere with Krenis actually. But this is too important to me. My biggest goal and major project is dependent on this skill taking shape. Determined to see it through, I decisively take a nap. Need to replenish my mental stores. When I wake up, I notice that Tiny has shifted his position and moved somewhere below me. Judging by my senses, he got tired of waiting and tunneled his way down to underneath the Queen's chamber so he'd at least have something to eat. I don't mind that. I'm starving myself actually, but the cores come first. Cores. Pleased to notice that my headache is resolved, I jump straight back into grinding, and the hours while away until my thoughts are sluggish and my head is pounding. The pile of cores I've worked on goes past 50 and almost reaches 70 by the time I finally get the announcement. Core engineering has reached level 10, skill upgrade available. Core engineering to core surgery. This skill guides the user when making finer and detailed changes to core energies, also enables the manipulation of the core of living creatures. Ah snap. I knew it. I had a feeling this was coming after my conversation with Formo. After all, how could they create such insanely powerful monsters in one go? Surely they worked on them over a number of evolutions after setting the core up the way they liked it. Here is the proof I was right. Gwei. This will enable me to work on the cores of Tiny and Krenis if I want, adjusting their path of evolution as they go. Not to mention the project I've been wanting to do this whole time. It's going to be a lot of work, but the future of the colony will never look brighter once I'm done. That's right. I'm going to work on the queen. If she agrees, then I'll use this skill to make adjustments to her core, not changing her at all, but focusing on her children. If I can make her offspring more intelligent, more like vibrant, then I'll be able to teach and guide them, turning them into something more than just workers. Don't get me wrong, my siblings are great aunts, loyal and brave, hardworking, basically better than me in almost every aspect. After seeing them cut down in their dozens by the humans as they charged blindly forward though, I decided then that I would have to make a change. Ants are designed to fight that way, to sacrifice themselves, hurl themselves forward and overwhelm the enemy with sheer numbers, their lives treated as disposable. I don't want my siblings to live like that. Family is important. I want them to be intelligent and clever, surviving the fight and not dying off pointlessly. With this skill I can make it happen. I'll go into the core and modify the offspring of the queen until they are like me. Super Ants. Chapter 179, The Pain Inside. At this moment, with my head filled with the glorious victory of the new super ant race, I notice something a little odd. There is a dull ache coming right from my core. What the heck is with that? What on Pangera makes your core hurt? Do I have core-itis? Flu of the core. Seasonal core swelling. I'm unusually disturbed by this inexplicable pain. Once formed, the core is attached to a monster's life force. If anything were to happen to it, I'm not sure how long I'd last. Focusing intently on this feeling, I try to analyze it. When I carefully sense the area around my core, the issue becomes clearer. There is more going on than meets the eye. Almost like a lung that is slowly leaking. As time passes, my core is slowly draining energy out into the air. Almost as if when my body tries to draw in mana, there isn't anything there, and then I exhale, mana out. I'm losing mana. As time passes, the loss becomes more noticeable until I was stuck with this pain that I can now feel. It's literally my core gasping for air. I need mana. Whilst the pain is completely debilitating now, it's only going to get worse the more energy I leak. I suddenly realize that this must have been what was inflicting the queen. Weakened and in pain by the lack of mana, she had literally been bleeding her life out into the air until I had finally noticed something was wrong. I can't help but get a little emotional. Damn it, mother. Just how self-sacrificing can you be? Just because I'd said the colony would be safe on the surface, you were willing to bleed mana from your core until you died. Why is it the best mother I've ever had as a giant ant? Well, now I feel like garbage. Not only because my core is increasingly pained, but the guilt of unknowingly causing such suffering to a dear parent. I'll make it up to you, queen. You'll be the mother of the most successful ant colony in the history of the entire. Wherever we are. I'm not really sure if this is the same universe as the one I was born in, come to think of it. Something to ask Gandalf if I ever see him again. Well, now that I know about this problem, what am I going to do about it? The fact that it took a few days for the problem to grow this severe means I'm not completely unable to operate on the surface. I'll just have to take frequent trips underground. Actually, is this the reason that Tiny has relocated himself underground? It's possible that his core has also advanced to the point where he can't sustain himself on the surface level of mana. Sighing to myself, I grasp my bag of unworked-on cores in my mandibles and make my way down to where Tiny is currently sitting munching on some low-level plants that leapt out of the walls and into his waiting hands. As soon as I descend past the surface level and into the dungeon proper, I can feel a sense of relief. As the light emitted by the mana veins washes over me and my feet begin drinking energy in a steady flow, the pain in my core begins to ease. I can feel myself getting a little more energetic and alert as I stop leeching out my life into the air. Feels good. This incident does really hit home at something that Gandalf said. When he told me I might join him one day, he suggested I might have a choice but to go further down. Is this what he meant? Every time I condense my core and evolve, I'll have a higher requirement for mana, forcing me to live deeper and deeper in the dungeon. I guess this explains why the most powerful monsters live closer to the center. I'm not sure how I feel about this. Obviously, evolving is the best thing in the universe. I should keep doing it, but then aren't I basically imprisoning myself? It's complicated. Think about it later. This is my policy and I'll stick to it. Tiny seems quite relaxed down here, his silvery hair taking on a distinct blue shade in the reflected light of the dungeon. I pass him the bag and then take some time to hollow out a chamber for us to use, shoving the loose soil further down the tunnel. Once that's done, I ask Tiny to keep watch for me and rest a little before resuming my core grinding. I don't want to rush over and start working on the Queen's core straight away with core surgery at level 1. If I can push a few more levels out of it, then I'll be more confident at being able to achieve my goal. Back to grinding. It takes a few more naps and 100 cores before I finally achieve core surgery level 3. By this time my brain feels like a puddle of sludge and my other brains aren't much better. Despite my improved mental power, grinding through so many cores in such a short time has pushed me right up to the wall. This kind of speed would have been completely impossible before my evolution, so there is that to celebrate. I have to say though, training this line of skills is a pain in the ass. Who has 100 cores lying around? Gandalf. All in all, I've nearly gone through 200 cores over the last few days, perfecting my skill at making nuanced changes to monsters and grinding that precious XP to get to this point. How long would it have taken me to amass all of these cores if I hadn't been able to rob the Lyrian vault? Not wanting to waste the opportunity, I flick cores at Tiny until he's full up. He's at the same level of evolution as I am, so it takes 50 cores for him to top out, then I do the same for myself. Your core has reached max capacity for your level of evolution. Hew. So soon after evolving and my core is already maxed out. It feels so good. All we need now is the special cores, but there is no way I'm going to put up with that pain for an extended time again. I can whip those up right when we are ready to evolve. Although, if you give it enough time, would you get used to it enough that you could absorb a second one? As if reading my thoughts, Tiny raises his head and glares at me with his dark red eyes. Never mind. I don't think I'll be able to raise the skill any higher for the short term, so I take good nap, getting Tiny to defend me from the spawning monsters and making sure he feeds the biomass to Krenis. When I wake up, I'm fully refreshed. Time to head over to the Queen and try this out. Zipping up the tunnel, full of beans, I push my way through the crowd of workers and come face to face with Mother once again. The giant ant is quite placid at the moment, perhaps enjoying this interlude of relative quiet. Hello Mother, how are things? I inquire. She reaches forward to tap on my head. I am well, little one. The colony has been safe here, you have done well. Ah shucks, I'm not used to this sort of praise. If I could blush I would. Thanks Mother. I beam, I'm glad I could help. Of course child. We should always seek to better our family, she says warmly. Exactly. That's why I'm here. I say enthusiastically. I've gained a skill that will allow me to make all of the ants in the colony stronger. The Queen's antennae whip about a little in surprise. Really child? That's wonderful, she says. Now for the tricky bit. I hesitate a little at this point. Thing is, it'll only work on the ants who haven't been born yet. I can't do anything to the family members who are already alive. The Queen seems confused. What are you planning on doing? She asks. I really have no idea how the monstrous Queen is going to react to the idea of me modifying her core. She is quite intelligent for a monster, but her own logic and mine and quite different, as well as our experiences. This Queen is still not even 1 year old. After all, she can't compare to my own nearly 16 years of life. This is what I can do. I decide to explain it all carefully. I can perform the skill on your core, while you rest here. Then I can make the young that will be born in the future more powerful, smarter. I'm hoping that by doing this, more of them will be able to survive and grow until they can evolve, making the colony stronger. The Queen wibbles her antennae around for a while as she digests this news. So you think you will be able to keep more children alive? She asks. Yes, I reply. Their species won't change and they will still be our family, but they'll be better equipped to survive and live a long life. What do you think? This is the magic moment. I've worked so hard to try and make this project a reality, but if the Queen says no, then I won't question it. The project will die right here. Perhaps it's silly to take the feeling of a monster into account, but this giant ant is no ordinary monster to me. This is the best parent and family member I've ever had. My main motivation for this project isn't even for ant world domination. I just don't want to see my siblings throwing their lives away anymore. I want them to be smart enough to retreat when needed and be able to take care of themselves. I look the Queen straight in the eye and await her judgment. I tried to be as honest as I could and explain things in a way she could understand. My heart is pounding in my chest as she gazes calmly back at me. Eventually she speaks. Of course, child. It is the responsibility of every member of our family to strengthen the whole. If you can achieve this, we will all benefit. That is what being part of the colony is about. You can start when you are ready. Of course, I should never have doubted the Queen's capacity to risk herself for her children. Chapter 180, The Day That Changed Pangera. Tentatively, I bring my antennae into contact with the Queen's and then activate the skill. Core surgery. With what I learned during the skill upgrade, I know that all I need is to be touching a part of the body on the monster I'll be operating on, but with an ant it feels like the antennae are the most appropriate place. As soon as the skill is activated, I feel a massive burst of information as the details of the Queen's core explode in my mind. Yikes. The Queen has by far the most complicated and powerful monster core I've seen, with the exception of Formo's worm. Frantically, I put my sub-brains to work processing all of this information before the onslaught of data just straight knocks me out. With my backup dancers doing their part, the pressure eases off instantly and I look in awe at the elegance of the Queen's core. She's actually a very powerful and rare creature, isn't she? I got the impression that ants weren't common in the dungeon, based on what the Queen told me, usually appearing randomly at the bottom of the first strata or sometimes even lower than that. After all, they have the extremely rare ability to produce their own offspring, rather than waiting for the dungeon to spawn more of their kind. We ants aren't the only ones in the dungeon with this ability, but we are among the most feared. Looking at the Queen's core, I can finally see how this function works. The Queen actually has a network of glands and organs that work together to perform this job. I had thought I'd just find an egg-laying organ plus 10 feet or something in here, but it isn't the case. The Queen has 3 total organs that contribute to producing her offspring. The way the offspring are produced is also not what I expected. Rather than being made from nothing, as eggs that then need to mature, the Queen actually converts biomass that she eats into eggs that can then be born. This is the reason that the workers bring her almost all of the biomass that they catch. Biomass points are directly converted into new workers inside the Queen. In a flash, I make another realization. This is why the Queen's egg producing rate has gone down ever since we came up to the surface. Like me, she has a powerful core and is a higher tier monster. She doesn't get much biomass from eating surface monsters or weak, lower level creatures. She was born at the lowest reaches of the first strata, her natural prey are down there. With so little biomass points being produced, her rate of laying has plummeted. This also explains the connected organs for egg producing. Firstly, she has an organ attached to her stomach that is designed to drain off biomass and convert it to some kind of liquid sludge. This is the biomass conversion organ, and it looks as if the Queen hasn't upgraded it at all. I bet she spent almost every bit of biomass on eggs and healing upgrades. Sure enough, when I check through all of her organ data, she's upgraded her antennae to +5 for healing channeling and upgraded her healing mana gland to +5 to take burst heal upgrade that lets her wave out the energy over an area, perfect for healing a huge army of ants. She's really too unselfish. This also shows a little lack of wisdom due to her being a young monster. Upgrading the egg production organs is by far the fastest way to grow the colony's power. I'll have to convince her to upgrade all the organs related to producing eggs as quickly as possible, all the way to +10 if we can, but at least to +5. The second organ in the process is the lifeform recoding organ. If the job of the conversion organ is to strip the biomass of its properties, turning it into a multi-purpose goo, then this organ is for reshaping that stuff into the necessary material for ant egg making. Finally, there was the egg production gland itself. This was responsible for taking the reformed goop and making it into ant eggs, essentially encoding ant DNA on the sludge. This process is going to be more complicated than I thought. I figured I could just go to the baby ant section and whip up some magic, but apparently not. I may have to make changes to multiple organs here and rework them slightly. I think I'll have to work backwards. I'll start at the last step, the egg production organ. Reaching in with the most delicate control my combined minds can muster, I ever so carefully begin to make fine adjustments to the design of the eggs produced by the organ. I don't have any intention of changing the early life phases of the ants. They'll go from eggs to larvae, as usual. In fact, I actually extend the early development phase of their lives. By increasing their youthful state, I gain leeway to develop them into more complex organism at the end of the process. The longer the gestation period, the more allowance I get. I don't want to keep the young in larval form for ages, but a little longer than they do currently gives me a little wiggle room. I'm looking at adding a lot of complexity to these guys. The first thing I do is give the hatchling worker a much more complex brain, beefing up the cunning stat considerably. I won't be able to get them to the same level of cunning that I had when I was reborn as an ant, and I'm not aiming to. If I gave them a brain that complicated, they'd be larval for a year and the queen would need so much biomass to produce a single egg it wouldn't be worth it. Instead, I'll give them the intelligence of a young human child which they can build on over the course of their evolutions. The next thing I do is give them the pheromone language gland at birth. This way I'll be able to communicate and teach them right from the moment they are born. If they can ask questions and talk with each other, then they should all advance at a faster pace. These complicated additions are really stressing the system here. I've overdrawn on my budget. To balance out the changes I've made, I'm forced to reduce the physical stats of the hatchlings to an even more horrible floor than they already started with. They'll be smaller and weaker than the current workers by a significant margin. It shouldn't matter though. My goal is to raise them up myself until they achieve their first evolution, then I'm hoping they'll be strong enough to take care of the next generation without me. Next, I push my current core engineering skill to the very limit and begin to change the evolutionary paths available to the workers. At the very least, I can alter the first few tiers. The inbuilt knowledge that comes with my skill tells me that the system will be able to fill in the rest even if I don't settle it myself. I just have to hope that it can carry on with the foundations I lay in a sensible way. For the future ant society I'm envisioning, I create 3 basic paths of evolution. The soldier path for those ants dedicated to battle, the support path for those who will be healers, tend to the young and become the future queens, and the artisan path for the ants who will indulge in their love of digging and making stuff. I'm extremely curious to see exactly what sort of things a highly intelligent ant decides to create. The soldiers will obviously focus on physical stats and resilience. Their future paths include leaders with auras, tanks and scouts. Each individual can flavor their own path with whatever skills and mutations they like, so hopefully this allows enough individuality. The support or worker class will be more intelligent, focus on the work of the colony, caring for the brood and the queens. Their future paths include juvenile queens, healer ants and brood tenders. The artisans are the caste I'm depending on to take over my core manipulation duties. I don't want to have to form special cores myself for every ant in the colony after all. These guys are highly intelligent and have a strong will but are the weakest physically by far. Their paths include core manipulator, ant mage and carver ant. The last one I gifted with exceedingly mobile claws on their front legs, almost like hands. I'm not sure what they'll be able to do with them, but perhaps they'll surprise me. I also managed to put in place special evolutions for each of these paths. I don't think an entire colony of ants will be able to fully reinforce their cores or anything, but it doesn't hurt to be prepared. By now the changes are really starting to push back hard and my mind is hitting the wall. I judge I won't be able to do much more before I can't go any further. I carefully check over my work so far to make sure I haven't made any massive mistakes like shift their antennae into the middle of their eyes or something. With that task settled, I sit back and take in my work, figuratively speaking. Despite the downgrades I've made, the rate of egg production for the new ants is still going to be about half of what it was before. I'm okay with this though. If each of the new workers can prove to be twice as effective as the previous, then it'll work out just fine. Next, I move on to the secondary organ and make the minute adjustments to ensure that the bio soup being produced contains the extra bits and pieces needed to produce the new juiced up eggs. By this point, my head is on fire. There isn't anything more I can do here even if I wanted to. Hopefully, the work I've done here is sufficient to make my dream a reality. With that, I withdraw my mind from the core of the queen. Chapter 181 Unexpected Company. My mind snaps back to its regular housing and I take a moment to reorient myself. I'm still where I was before, partially buried in a mound of workers with the queen standing in front of me, quite close. "Are you all right, child?" she asks, seeing me suddenly look so fatigued. "I'm completely fine," I gasp out as my brain continues to melt into sludge. "How are you? How did it all go?" I'm anxious to know if there was any pain or discomfort during the process. I could have tested it on my pets, but there is a chance that the skill would have a different effect on them since they have a different relationship with me than most monsters. In the end, I went ahead and worked on the queen, hoping that it would all be fine. "I am fine," the queen assures me. "It tickled a bit." Tickled. So having the fundamental makeup of your being tinkered with only results in a tickle. Thank goodness. That's great. I cry. Excellent. The whole process has been a success. Hopefully from now on our family will experience a great gain in strength. I stick around to counsel the queen about spending some biomass to mutate her egg production organs. She is quite reluctant at first, but after trying several arguments I eventually tell her that by upgrading all 3 organs to +5 it will greatly increase the effect of the changes I've made to her core. This isn't really a lie. If she upgrades those organs and chooses some good mutation advancements for them, the rate of egg production will increase as the overall efficiency of the system goes up. I don't know for sure what advancement choices will appear, but it isn't hard to guess that almost all of them will be based around speeding up the process, reducing the cost of each egg, or improving the stats of the offspring, any of which would be fine. Once I'm certain that the queen has agreed to upgrade all 3 organs before beginning to produce the new workers, I drag myself back down to where Tiny is waiting and take a quick nap. The relentless battering my mind has taken has pushed even my newly evolved self pretty darn hard. Using the core surgery skill in particular was exceptionally draining. If I'd attempted to do it with my old self, I'd have had absolutely no chance of getting anywhere at all. My respect for the Sophis only increases the further I walk down the path of core manipulation. Just how powerful are their minds to create the things they do? Are their brains filling their heads and extending down into their torso? Where do they fit it all? When I awake, it isn't because I've rested my fill, but rather because my antennae are picking up something strange. Emergency pheromones from the workers. Gah, what is it? What's happening? Tiny, come on, man. Action stations. I blearily shout. For once my pet ape is actually awake, and when he sees me stumbling about drunkenly as I struggle to get my bearings, he reaches out with massive paw and grabs hold of me firmly before picking me up and placing me on his shoulder. I clutch onto his fur to avoid falling flat on my face, and just like that he's up and moving, carrying me along for the ride. With his massive arms he reaches out and takes hold of the tunnel walls before dragging his massive frame upwards as if climbing on a jungle gym. When we reach the queen's chamber, it is buzzing like a hive, the workers jittering this way and that, and some of them stream upwards to the peak of the hill. The majority of them seem to want to remain and defend the queen, albeit in a highly agitated manner. Buried somewhere in that nervous mass of the workers, the queen seems content to stay still for the time being. I don't try to talk to her, since it would be difficult to get a pheromone message through what is essentially hundreds of workers screaming, "Emergency!" at the top of their lungs. Being careful not to crush the ants as he moves, Tiny continues to carry us to the surface one handhold at a time. By this stage I've mostly sorted myself out. My headache hasn't fully receded, but it's much improved from when I began my rest. I've managed to notice Krenis and Vibrant are relaxing on my person as per usual, which is something of a relief. I'd rather they be where I can see them than off gallivanting somewhere when there might be a potential attack. When Tiny makes his way out in the light at the top of the anthill, I can finally take in the situation. Hundreds of ants have already appeared in response to the threat, aggressively postured to defend the colony from all directions. Beyond them I can see something I truly did not expect to see. Several hundred disheveled-looking humans are clustered around a number of wagons pulled by extremely poorly-looking horses. At the lead is a figure that I sadly recognize all too well. The priest, his robe stained with dirt and potentially dried blood, becomes ecstatic at the sight of me and runs forward, spooking the workers considerably. They gnash their mandibles at him, and I reluctantly ask them to settle down as I advance forward to meet him. My life might be significantly simplified by this guy vanishing, but I don't really want to kill him of anything. Besides, judging by the look of all of these people, something rather serious has gone down. I recognize a few others in the group as members of the village that had rallied around me and the queen during our short-lived cooperation. In fact, the old lady I had captured before is here before. Enid. As soon as the priest reaches me, he falls to his knees and begins proclaiming in a loud voice, turning to indicate that the villagers behind him should do the same. ... This guy really wants to feed the Dark One's ego, doesn't he? I still have no idea what the heck he is saying, so for the time being I have to leave him to his own devices. It's a darn good thing I've evolved and actually have a chance to pull off the mind magic transformation, otherwise I'd be forced into some kind of interpretive dance right now. Turning my attention inwardly and ignoring the prostrating human in front of me, I summon the combined power of the brains and begin to painstakingly work on the transformation structure. Not daring to allow myself any slips, this time I double my focus and take everything slowly. This time I managed to make it all the way to the end of the process without stuffing it up, but so careful and painstaking was I that it takes a full 10 minutes for me finally complete it. During this time the humans have started to grow increasingly fidgety, but the priest's capacity to extol my virtues seems to be endless. Success. Finally complete. I admire the fiendishly complex final product in my mind. I've no idea why it's so outlandishly difficult to construct, but it's done. Now to put the darn thing to use. Along with the knowledge of how to construct the various mana transformers, the way to use them was also granted to me with the purchase of the skill. The construct itself doesn't do anything special, it's simply the magical mixing bowl that changes regular, attribute-less mana into the desired type. In this instance, what I do is maintain the finished construct with one of my sub-brains and get the other to draw out raw mana from my core, which is then fed into the shape in a specific way. As soon as the raw mana enters, the construct leaps into life, surprising me momentarily. I didn't know it moved. The entire construct begins to spin and whirl, different sections moving at different speeds and in subtly different directions. The entire effect is like a beautiful dance, like an engine but infinitely more intricate. Then finally, out the other end of the construct a thin thread of glittering golden light emerges, mind mana. With my main mind I eagerly seize this new mana and begin to replicate the spell I'd seen Formo cast so magnificently and the human queen cast so poorly. Mind mana can do a heck of a lot more than this, I'm sure, but from what I've gathered this spell, which effectively enables universal communication between any two organisms smart enough to think, kind of overshadows the rest of the kit. The mind bridge. Hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, I reach out and connect to the best human for the job. Enid, what are you people doing here? The old lady leaps a foot in the air and drops her basket, spilling its contents and drawing the attention of the people around her. Me, she squawks. Chapter 182 Rumor has I. Yes, you I snap. Enid immediately stumbles forward until she reaches the side of the still sonorously praising one-armed priest. I see her concentrate and then her voice appears in my mind. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to communicate with this man? She indicates the priest, it was he who led our people to this place. This priest. How the heck did he find me? Does he have some sort of tracking device on me or something? More likely he was able to follow our trail somehow, but the bottom line remains, what the heck are these people here for? They certainly don't look as they've come to fight, judging by the number of women and children in the crowd, not to mention the sheer lack of arms. I will speak to you since I have had dealings with you before. Make it clear to the others I am speaking to you. I don't want to talk to that guy. He makes me nervous. Enid take a moment to gingerly touch the priest on the shoulder and indicate that I am communicating with her using mind magic. Rather than disappointed, the priest's face is overcome with enlightenment and he bows low before me, head nearly touching the ground, before he backs away to speak animatedly to the crowd. Nothing phases this guy. Enid, tell me why these people have followed my family here to the wild lands. She hesitates a moment before she speaks. Our homes have been destroyed. After you vanished following the assault on the castle, things settled down at first. Many of the villagers wanted to know where you went, but we weren't told anything. Things were calm for a week, but then. She shivers then. Her recollections are apparently still terrifying. Enid draws a deep breath before focusing her mind once more. Then the capital caught fire. We could hear the roaring of beasts from our houses and flames reached the so high it was sky was burning. We were terrified. Nobody knew what to do. Then monsters burst out of the dungeon and into the church, dozens of them. Some of the villagers fought for a time, but they were never ending. Then the big ones came. She pauses for a moment, unable to go on. I'm not as good at reading human expressions as perhaps I was before, but she seems overwhelmed with sadness and tears are streaming down her cheeks. Giant crocodiles came out. The children of Geros. They killed so many. Only thanks to Father Bane did we survive. He rallied the survivors and organized a retreat. We ran from the town with nothing but what we could carry on our backs or throw onto a few carts. With the capital burning, we had nowhere to go. She gestures to the broken and desperate people behind her. Without food or supplies, without knowing what was happening, we decided to flee south. We heard word of the colony's passage as we traveled. Father Bane believed that perhaps you would be able to help us as you had in the past, and so we came here looking for you. Looking me in the eye, I can see she doesn't hold much hope. Having interacted with me directly and taken part in the deception to save her village from themselves, she knows that I am not an altruistic savior from the dungeon as the priest believed. I just hope that you will let us settle nearby and leave us in peace, that's all we can ask. If you aren't willing, then you may as well eat us, she says bitterly. We've lost everything and have nowhere else to go. I don't think I'll be eating anyone here, even if I do need biomass. I'll be getting that from the dungeon in short order. I need to prepare myself before the future generation of ant workers is born. This is a critical time for me in the colony. I don't want any of this crap to interfere with me raising the future workforce. Tell your people to go make camp at least 1 kilometer in that direction. I point with my antennae in front of the shocked woman, Tell Bane I want him to get them settled, make sure they don't interfere with the workers or approach the nest, he's in charge. I want you to stick around so I can ask more questions. Surprised and joyful, Enid passes my words on to the others. The people appear glad to some extent, a little light returns to their dark and dull faces. With a little more energy and spring in their step they turn as Bane, delirious with joy at being entrusted with this task, begins to lead the others across, helping them to their feet and urging them with his persuasive voice. Enid, sit there. I point the tired old woman to a nearby stone and she gladly hobbles over to it and sits. I have no idea how she managed the journey at her age, trudging by foot over such a large distance. It was tiring enough for me and I'm a monster. What has happened, Enid? Tell me what you know. She shakes her head, gray hair swaying around her ears. I don't know much. I think the monsters have invaded the surface. The capital got the worst of it. I can't imagine any other reason for the whole city to be torched like that. Those poor people. There would have been thousands of people trapped inside those walls. It isn't hard to imagine the chaos that would have occurred. I know a little about the dungeon, Enid continues. My husband taught me a lot about his work. It isn't normal for monsters to approach the surface like this. Something strange is happening. I have no doubt about that. To me, strange stuff has been happening ever since I arrived here, so I'm not too fussed by it. You mentioned the Croca beasts. I mean the Geros infants. Why bring them up in particular? There were a lot of them. More than you would normally expect. You usually only find those things around here when their mother has been passed and lain a clutch of eggs somewhere deep, but these ones were young. I have to think they were lain somewhere close to the surface, which would mean. Wait a moment, I interrupt. Their mother. The older woman looks at me somewhat confused. Of course, didn't the queen tell you about Geros? Not really. Geros has been around this area, deep in the dungeon for hundreds of years. A century ago the beast decided to try and raise its own young. Ever since then its hateful offspring have filled the dungeon under Lyria. So all of those damnable crocs actually did come from a single parent. Like, all of them. I know how that process works now, unless there is some crazy variant of it. That Geros monster would have had to have eaten an absolute mountain of biomass to produce so many large and complex creatures. Enid breaks into my thoughts with her mental voice. I think Geros must have risen up in the dungeon and assaulted the surface. It sounds insane, since something like that hasn't happened for thousands of years, but it's the only thing I can think of that fits. Just how? Why? Oh, that's easy, I say absent-mindedly. The mana level in the dungeon is still getting higher is all. First shock, then horror overtake Enid's face before her eyes roll back in her head and she passes out. Chapter 183 Inconvenient. Once Enid wakes up and manages to gather herself, I speak to her a little longer before sending her back to her people. Then I lay a heck of a big pheromone marker around their campsite, encouraging the workers not to eat them. If they run into a worker outside of that ring, that'll be a little different. Although I'm inclined to trust these people a heck of a lot more than I ever trusted their queen, I'm not prepared to let them run around willy-nilly. They've been given a very small hurdle to jump over as the first action towards building trust. Let's see how they go. Job done. I wander back over to the anthill, collecting Tiny on the way, and we descend down to our little chamber, snacking on a few monsters once we get there. This is the last thing we needed right now. The changes to the Queen's core have only just been made. It'll be a week, 2 at the most, before she's ready and lain the first batch of the new wave of workers. I cannot afford to have anything go wrong. Those ants will be a heck of a lot smarter than the previous hatchlings, but they are also significantly weaker. These ants are going to be like human infants. Without someone to help guide them and raise them in the beginning, they won't be able to reach their potential. If I've got giant croca babies and their mother burning the dungeon tunnels and the entire surface to the ground, then it's hardly going to be an ideal environment to raise ant hatchlings. What a pain in the thorax. What the heck am I going to do? I can't just leave it as is. Enid made it perfectly clear that there would likely be more refugees from Lyria heading south over the next few days. She seemed to think that the destruction was centered on the capital and then expanded outwards. There were a whole lot of panicked people in the towns and villages they passed, getting ready to flee at the first sign of danger. Those people are probably already on the road in this direction. Even if I don't do anything about it, the problem will reach me eventually. If those crocs and the other monsters are running about on the surface, then there's no reason to believe they won't come here. Only one thing for it then. If I'm going to get the peace and quiet I need to change the destiny of antkind, then I'm going to have to clear up our little croc problem. First things first. Tiny. Krenis. It's time to go smash stuff and eat. Vibrant. Where did you get to? Here, here. She's on top of Tiny's head for a change. I should encourage that. We're moving out into the dungeon. We need to clear it at high speed and stuff ourselves with biomass as we go. You coming? Yippee. Of course she is. I've already done what I can to organize the humans for the time being. They know where to go and where not to. They have access to water from a nearby spring and they'll need to sort themselves out food-wise to some extent. It isn't as if we have a heap of ant bakers churning out fine baguettes or anything. The first order of business is to go into the dungeon and check out the situation there, whilst power eating. I need more biomass and Krenis needs to grow up as quickly as possible. I send a quick message to Enid letting her know that I'll be in the dungeon for the next few days and to make sure her people and any newcomers stick to the rules of laying down in my absence. I'm not worried about these humans overpowering the colony at all. They're mostly farmers and craftsmen, but I do want to avoid unnecessary casualties on both sides. We have bigger crocs to fry. I break off the mind bridge to Enid and immediately my sub-brains relax into little balls of goop. It was damn hard maintaining it over that distance, but I wanted to test my limits. Formo managed to weave one over a distance of kilometers without breaking a sweat, but I'm still a mile away from that level. Even maintaining it over a distance of 1 kilometer was about all I could manage. I also allow the mind magic construct to collapse at this time, further releasing the burden on my brains. Now that I succeeded once, I'm sure I'll be able to reproduce it easier the next time. Once my brains have had a rest, I'll need to get to testing some more combat-oriented transformation constructs. Probably the water one. Into the dungeon. The gang advances down into the dungeon at a rapid pace. Tiny is able to quickly slap to death any of the regular customers we see as we rapidly descend through the upper tunnels. We take a few detours here and there to make sure nothing is slipping past us as we travel, fleshing out my tunnel map a little more and pushing the skill to level 5. Anytime we encounter an evolved creature, we get the little ones to stuff themselves with it to mount up that biomass. There is one problem I have though. Krenis, I ask. Yes, master, she responds quickly this time, perhaps sensing I wasn't going to tolerate silence on this one. Are you actually growing? You're the same size as you were when you were born, I point out. Opening square bracket ... closing square bracket. It's true. She's still roughly the size of a tennis ball. Sometimes she appears a bit larger and certainly anytime she's eating she looks much bigger, but when at rest, such as now, she reverts back to a handy tennis ball. Well, I prod. Opening square bracket ... I am growing, master, she finally responds, sounding embarrassed. And she clearly doesn't want to be talking about this. I can compress the extra mass, master, due my nature as a shadow beast. I have been growing properly. So why do you choose to be such a small size all the time? I ask, baffled. Wouldn't it be more impressive to be larger? Display her strength to the world. Opening square bracket ... I think it's easier like this, she suddenly gushes. I fit on master's back much more comfortably. Well, that is true, I suppose. If you want to stay small, you can stay small, Krenis. Whatever floats your boat, I say. Just let me know the second you're ready for combat. We need to power level you in a big way. Yes, master. It won't be long now. Oh, good. The sooner she can turn into the blending tentacle orb of death she was before, the better. She's seriously taking a lot longer to grow than Tiny did. Is it because she's a more complex creature? Or at least she was at the time of her reconstitution. I'm starting to see how that skill that increases the speed of pet growth might be desirable. We continue our way down the tunnels. So far everything appears to be as normal. Dumb plants, the occasional pig, various other little bits of nothing. Other than dashing about every now and again to train the skill, I leave most of the fighting to Tiny. I need to let my brains rest before I start testing new magic constructions. I do manage to put my new mandibles to work, however. The savage mandibles have much more impressive cutting strength than the regular mandibles. The bites are nastier, wider and look like they'd be more difficult to heal as well. All in all, I'm quite happy with this upgrade. Time to go deeper. Chapter 184, Ape Slap. We make much more rapid progress in our descent this time as opposed to the first. Tiny is much stronger after his second consecutive special evolution, and he smashes his way with extreme speed and a strangely casual attitude through these small fry. I don't think I've even seen him throw a punch, he's just squashing monsters flat underneath his palms for the most part. I really have no idea exactly what he gained in the evolution. Perhaps some new organs. Something related to his lightning. Maybe a boost to his sonic scream. I'm more tempted than ever to take the skill that allows me to look at a pet's status, simply for convenience sake, but I resist. Now that I have the core surgery skill, I can take a look at his information using that. It's just a bit more difficult to do so. I have a lot of skill points saved up at the moment, so the thought of casually spending one or two to make life a little easier is extremely tempting. As Tiny keeps slapping his way through the upper layers, we pause every now and again to let the little ones eat. I've told Krenis to exercise as much as possible to aid her digestion in order to allow for maximum food stuffage in the shortest period of time. What this means is that she is frantically waving tentacles all over the place whilst riding on my back. She can extend a lot more limbs a lot further than she could not that long ago, so I'll take that as evidence that she is fact growing properly. Whenever we take breaks, I flip open the skills menu and flick through it, looking for anything new that has appeared or anything that might be useful. There are a few skills I hadn't seen before that I'm considering purchasing, especially these few. Water Magic Affinity increases the user's comfort, speed and efficacy when using mana of the water attribute. Fire Magic Affinity increases the user's comfort, speed and efficacy when using mana of the fire attribute. Earth Magic Affinity increases the user's comfort, speed and efficacy when using mana of the earth attribute. Wind Magic Affinity increases the user's comfort, speed and efficacy when using mana of the wind attribute. The appearance of these skills seems to answer a few questions in my mind. It appears that once an intelligent creature has mastered the transformation skill to some extent, then they will be able to choose an affinity to make it easier to advance onto the next step. I'm guessing that with higher levels of the mana transformation skill, or perhaps when the skill advances to the next rank, then other, more advanced affinities will become unlocked. It makes sense that these basic elements are the first to become available, since of all the mana types, these four have the most basic transformation constructs, meaning they are the most simple attributes of all. After some consideration, I eventually purchased the Water Magic Affinity. I know that the Croca beasts have a fire magic gland, despite being based on an aquatic creature. Even if water magic doesn't prove to be too effective offensively against them, I'm sure it'll be more than a little handy defensively. That thought leads me in an interesting direction. Is it possible for a creature to have poor compatibility with certain elements? Or good affinity? A water-based lifeform like a crocodile doesn't seem to have good synergy with fire magic on the surface. Maybe I'm overthinking the whole crocodile thing. Just because they dwell in water on my world doesn't necessarily mean that they do here, or that the croca beasts are better in water than anything else in the dungeon. I decide to poke through a Geros infant core the next time I get one. My skill level is much higher now than the last time I looked at one, and I might be able to see something I couldn't before. We continue for about an hour, stopping every now and again. Eventually we make our way down to the location of the shortcut we had previously dug. Whilst Tiny smashes everything, I continue to charge about like crazy, delighting the little ones, until the notification springs up in my mind. Dash has reached level 5. Skill advancement available. Nice. Dash greater than rapid dash. Like a flaming horse, the user will be able to dash faster and with more precision. I'll take it. Even with this, I still have 10 skill points saved up. I'll leave it for now, but I really ought to be spending these. Skill points in the bank do nothing to increase strength. I do need a few points in reserve so I can advance key skills when they hit the cap, but 10 is really pushing it. Once the local tunnel has been emptied out, then we excavate the entrance and start clearing the shortcut of spawned monsters. By this time the dungeon has extended its veins all the way to the top. Beasties and plants have spawned all over the place and started ripping into each other with gusto. It's all over very quickly once we arrive. I go into high gear just to help take care of things quickly and bite the heck out of everything I see. Once finished, we pile up the more evolved species at the top of the shortcut and I spray food pheromones all over the place. This tasty meal should find itself in front of the queen fairly shortly. Next order of business. Brief rest. Okay. Back at it. In order to ensure the dungeon beneath the colony is safe, we keep moving and mapping out the branching paths as much as possible. Every tunnel Tiny can fit in is explored to some extent. Those that he can't, I scurry into myself and snap everything I find to bits. This is exhausting. On the plus side, my tunnel map is becoming more and more complete. This is something necessary for the defense of the colony. After we spend another 2 hours clearing out the tunnels, we reconvene once again back at the shortcut for another rest and feeding session. Tiny and I are getting very little biomass from the food at this point. I scrounge together 5 points after stuffing myself, but at least I get the benefit of having my various nicks healed. I spend the points straight away on upgrading my new supportive skeleton to +2 and my coordination cortex to +1. The most efficient play will be to upgrade these new body parts to +5 before resuming the journey to all +10. Technically I take a body part to +15 at this level of evolution. I really need to get my eat on. I've evolved too quickly for my stomach to keep up. I send Tiny up the shortcut with another shipment of food for the queen. She'll get even less than I do out of these monsters, but it's much better than feeding on the piddling surface creatures. The sooner we get that egg production system upgraded, the better. The new generation must be as strong as possible. I'll have to check in on her when I get back actually. If she's storing biomass to produce eggs without upgrading herself. Let's just say I wouldn't be surprised. When Tiny returns, we settle in for a brief nap and then gather together into the main tunnel, sealing the shortcut closed behind us. It's time to delve a little deeper. We still have over a day of exploration time before we are expected back on the surface, and I intend to be sure there aren't any threats coming from below before we return. At this point I hear something echoing up the tunnel towards us. A faint wail, the fading sound of bone on bone. Something is coming. Chapter 185 The Surge. Almost as if the air were rushing towards us, I can feel a wave pressure roll up the tunnel and press against my face. It isn't comfortable. Something is coming up. Get ready to fight. I warn my crew. Vibrant and Krenis huddle carefully on my person. Tiny stands to his full height, his head brushing the roof. He can also sense something is coming. His silver fur starts to rise off his frame as electrical sparks begin to shimmer and zap across his frame. Oh, he's pumped up. I'm also keen to see what he can do now that he's evolved. That massive frame isn't for nothing. I'm sure I'll see something interesting when he goes at it. Now that I think of it, I should also start making some preparations. My two sub-brains are well rested now and ready for action. It's time to put them to work. Wanting to test their strength, I task each of them with a separate spell, one gravity bolt each. Best to begin with the basics and work their way up. As the pressure continues to build and roll against us like waves from the tunnel before us, I sense internally as my two little helpers get busy shaping the spells. Independently they draw on the gravitational mana stored in my gland and begin to shape the spells. Gway. Excellent. Chuckling to myself with glee, I then begin to shape a third spell with my main mind. Not double the spells, triple the spells. This is the true, awesome power of my divergent mind. The sub-brains are not as quick nor as capable as I was in my last evolution. They lack the force of will to shift the mana as rapidly and the cunning to weave the shapes as deftly, but even if it takes them twice as long, being able to independently cast their own spells makes these sub-brains so damn useful. Now to unleash the fearsome might, the unparalleled force and the extraordinary dexterity of my newly upgraded main brain. After all, most of the extra juice I pumped into my mental faculties was spent on this. In terms of will or cunning, I'm nothing like I was before. Behold, with force and precision I draw on the gravitational mana to rapidly weave it into a gravity spear. The long body of the spell with its surrounding intricate engraved circles take shape at record pace. Incredible. My ability to use magic in combat situations has absolutely shot through the roof. I'm more than satisfied. With my next evolution I may spend a little of my budget neatening up the edges, but I don't think I need much more juice in the mental department. I'll be ramping up my physical stats until the same size as Tiny. Once the spells are formed I hold each of them ready, one mind for each, and prepare myself to face whatever is coming up the tunnel. Tiny is so excited he's practically fidgeting. Calm down. Oi. Gradually the sounds from the tunnel build in volume. From a whisper to a murmur and then rising into a crescendo of sound. Roars, screams and the pounding of feet fill the air, rattling my nerves. I still can't see anything coming. Where the heck are they? This sounds like a freaking stampede of monsters. Just when I'm starting to reconsider our frontal approach, the edges of the horde come into view. My first impression is a wave of teeth rushing towards us at full speed. The second and third impressions are much the same. What the heck is this? Dozens of monsters, hundreds even, are charging towards us with mouths gaping and claws rending the air. What's going on? They aren't fighting each other at all. This is weird. Gandalf. Any advice? Damn it, you beardy-faced pile of senility. Tiny. This is going to get rough. Go all out. Why the hell didn't I get a gravity bomb ready? I see all sorts of monsters mixed into the onrushing horde. Shadowy monsters, imps, pigs and even some of the mobile plant types are in the mix. I just can't understand why they are all cooperating. And the formless pressure is still building, pressing down on us like an unseen hand. No time to hesitate. Let's do this. Experience the power of my ant soul. Gravity spear. Gravity bolt. Gravity Bolt. All three spells are launched simultaneously, streaking through the air like glittering purple arrows. The monsters have no capacity to dodge, as packed together as they are. The leading shadow beast is speared directly through the chest, and the creatures around him are instantly wrapped within the expanding circles as the spell activates. The second the pull is applied, over 10 monsters are dragged towards the target. Not expecting the sudden force, they are thrown off their feet and stumble, only to be smashed into the ground by the pounding feet of the creatures behind them. Some other monsters trip and fall, only to meet the same fate as the others under the heels, claws of their brethren. You have slain. You have slain. No time for that. The two gravity bolts smack into another two monsters and drag them down to the ground. These are also quickly crushed. With 5 or 6 monsters dead, the size of the coming monster wave hasn't even diminished. Going to need to bring out the big guns. I spin up the backup singers and task them with preparing the much more complex gravity domain. With the two of them working in tandem, they should be able to handle it. I don't want to chip in with the main mind right now, I need my wits about me. Tiny is getting increasingly riled up. The electricity is crackling all over his frame by now, stinging the air around with frequent flashes of light. In the face on the onrushing monsters, he doesn't flinch but rather smashes his chest with his mighty fists and roars. His powerful bellows and shrieks are so loud they even rise above the cacophony of the beasts coming at us. He doesn't stop there. Having issued his challenge, the ape begins to charge forward, smashing the tunnel floor with his knuckles as he picks up speed. He's not content to wait at all, he's going to take the fight to the enemy. Damn it, Tiny. We're going in with him. Hold on. Dash. I spring forward with Tiny, hurtling ourselves to the onrushing horde. As I get closer, the thousands of teeth and claws grow larger in my sight until there is nothing else I can see. This is madness. What is happening here is sheer madness. How's that domain coming? Still not ready. Crash. Like a cannonball, Tiny smashes into the front ranks of the wave, fists flying. Monsters are catapulted into the air and smash into the walls as he continues to propel himself forward, bellowing his challenge as he goes. The enemies are endless. As Tiny moves forward, he is quickly surrounded. The monsters latch onto him with claws, mouths, tentacles, and whatever else they have available, lashing the ape again and again. Oh no, you don't. Shattering bite. Crunch. Pouring out my stamina into the bite, I manifest jaws of light over 2 meters long and rip them closed. The savage mandibles display their ferocity, tearing my enemies apart and crushing them in the same breath. The horde of monsters is endless. Is this the true wave? I feel like I'm battling the tide. Shattering bite. Shattering bite. Shattering bite. Shattering bite. I lash out at the monsters closing in around us, but as quickly as I crush them, they are instantly replaced by more. Tiny doesn't seem to care. He keeps pushing deeper, sending waves of monsters flying with every lashing of his fists. The electricity on him is still building. It started flashing out and lighting up the monsters around him like Christmas trees, but it doesn't feel like it's going to stop there. Chapter 186, Dire Lightning Storm. Kong. Electricity rippling across his body endlessly, Tiny's fists continue to flash out and devastate his opponents. None can stand up to his blows. That doesn't shock me much. We're talking about a 10-foot-tall gorilla monster here. If I'd seen a gorilla on Earth that was 10 feet tall, I'd have fair browned my downstairs department. Physical strength is something he has in spades. What is really impressive is the lightning strikes flashing from his body without him having to think about it, blasting creatures around him who draw too close. Problem is they have no choice but to get too close, since they are a mindless mass of monsters that pushes forward no matter what. We are still taking damage, he and I. As fast as we can destroy the enemies, they are replaced just as quickly. It only took a few seconds of following Tiny's charge for the two of us to be completely surrounded, buried amongst the monsters. They lash at us from all sides, battering me with their limbs, trying to bite through my tough carapace and raising sparks between their teeth and my shell. I'm losing HP here. Thankfully my defense is holding up pretty well, but Tiny is suffering more. He doesn't have a nice handy outer skeleton and his fur is only a little protection. I feel as if his physical stats are inordinately slanted towards might as opposed to toughness. As the claws and teeth of our foes rain down on him, he is continuously taking damage. Not that he slows down any. Is that domain ready yet? My two sub-brains have been frantically working together to weave the far more complex spell as quickly as they can, but it's still not done. Unwilling to wait any longer, I focus with my main mind and ignore the rain of blows that fall on me the moment I grow still. With every ounce of my mental strength applied to the task, the spell takes form rapidly, layer after layer of complexity added to the construct until it's finally complete. Not hesitating in the slightest, I open the sluice gates and pour in the gravitational mana like it's going out of fashion. Get this. Spell. Done. There. The instant it's ready, I unleash the domain and the glittering purple dome of energy rapidly expands outwards, encompassing the entire width of the tunnel. It expands 10 meters out in all directions. THROOM. With an audible noise, the massive gravitation pull kicks in and the monsters around me are immediately affected. Tiny. I shout. The ape instantly realizes what has happened and turns back towards me. These monsters are made of sterner stuff and won't collapse to the ground just because of the domain, but their ability to move and contest us has easily halved. The shadow beasts are probably holding up better than the rest, their strange elastic flesh is far stronger than it appears. But now we can manage. Tiny opens his mouth wide and unleashes his ultimate bat scream, the ultrasonic wave. The ear-shattering sound is even stronger than before, piercing straight through my ear holes and stabbing into my brain. That stings. I manage to resist the stunning effect of the scream thanks to my overtuned will, but most of the monsters around us aren't so lucky. Those caught inside the domain have it the worst, hit by double debilitating effects, but those on the outside don't look so flash either. Get em. The two of us immediately start flailing about madly, Tiny with his fists and me with my jaws. I use Shattering Bite over and over again until my face aches and exhaustion creeps in whilst Tiny lashes out with his fists endlessly. Even now the monsters keep coming. They are walking straight into the domain, but they don't seem to care. What is driving these creatures? Tiny, retreat and eat something, restore your strength. The limiting factor here is our stamina. I might have taken less damage than Tiny, but his robust physique will provide him a lot more energy. After constantly using my advanced physical skills, I'm beginning to run out of gas. My two sub-brains are currently tasked with maintaining the domain. A constant flood of gravitational mana flows out of my gland and into the construct powering the spell. Thanks to the bottomless upgrade, I don't need to worry about running out of mana in the short term. My feet are sucking up energy from the floor every passing second, but the rate of transfer into gravity mana is still painfully slow. Tiny shakes his head at me but ultimately can't refuse my order. He throws himself behind me and starts stuffing his face with the plentiful biomass littered across the tunnel floor. The food will help accelerate the healing of his wounds and give a little extra fuel in the stamina fire. Krenis. Go with him, this is going to get dangerous. I yell as I flick the little ball of dark rubber at Tiny as he runs past. With all of these attacks raining down on me, I don't want the little one to get squashed by accident. She's still not grown and combat ready after all. Vibrant at least is a proper monster, with a carapace to protect her from any glancing blows. With Tiny gone, the monsters descend on me like locusts. I can't even tell how many there are if we are whittling down their numbers even slightly. My impressive, nearly 360-degree vision is giving me a wonderful 360-degree view of monsters' mouths trying to attach themselves to my person. I continue to absorb the battering, laying out with my mandibles at every opportunity. In an effort to avoid complete exhaustion, I stopped using my skills and instead started channeling mana into my mandibles to add a bit more punch to my bite. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The horrific sounds of my jaws at work mixed with the howls and savage cries of the beasts. I felt like I held on for hours, but it was probably only a minute before I heard Tiny's furious voice ringing in my mind. Fight. Sounds like he's had enough eating. I turn and bolt towards his location at the rear of the fight as he charges forward into the fray once more. I try and stay close behind him as I start stuffing my face with biomass and activate my healing gland to recover from the battering I'd just received. I hope Tiny can hold on for a while. I'm knackered. This is the weakness of my body right now. Mental power for days but not enough combat effectiveness to take from it yet. I need to start practicing the water transformation construct as soon as possible. Tiny rejoins the fight with relish and pounds his opponents into the dirt with rising glee. The electricity on his body is still crackling away, blasting the occasional monster into a deep-fried version of itself. Does he ever run out of electricity? Apparently not. With a mighty bellow, Tiny raises both his hands over his head, bringing them together for a slam. Once his fists rise into the air, all the electrical energy crackling over his body floods up his arms and concentrates on his fists, causing them to shine so brightly I wish I had eyelids. As the electrical energy intensifies, I can hear a static whine rising in pitch every moment until it rises above the register I can hear. I can still feel it though, causing the hairs on my antennae to shake violently. The monsters around him don't seem to know what is coming as they continue to charge forward, leaping at Tiny, desperate to take a bite out of him. Then those fists come down and the tunnel is filled with lightning. The entire tunnel shakes when those fists impact the ground, knocking most monsters off their feet, but it isn't over. The electricity contained in the strike erupts explosively, rolling outwards from the point of impact in a forward arc. Crackling over the floor, it slides over the ground like a wave, and every monster it touches gets thoroughly cooked. Dozens of monsters fall to the ground as the tide of lightning rolls through their ranks, decimating the foes in a blinding flash. That is hot. 2. Death. Tiny U the Ape. Chapter 187 Krenis Unleashed. I hadn't even finished celebrating Tiny's spectacular lightning wave technique, named it myself, before my joy is quenched by more monsters rushing up as the ones in front of them collapsed from being overcooked. Damn it. How many of these damn things are there going to be? I hurriedly make use of the room Tiny has bought us by stuffing my face as full of biomass as quickly as I can. Every bit counts. I also snap up my status for a moment to check on any skill changes. Every edge I can get in this critical fight. I've gained a level of Shattering Bite and 2 levels in Advanced Exoskeleton Defense. Letting myself get battered by a horde of trash seems like a good way to train that skill, if painful. It looks like I'm going to get battered to hell all over again in a minute. The next wave of shadow beasts will be on us in a few seconds. Seems I also managed to gain 2 levels from the conflict as well. Not too helpful at the present moment, but nice to know. Master Krenis, what's up? I'm ready. Those monsters are closing in quick. I don't have time for a chat. Ready for what? To fight. Fight what? I really need her to get to the point here. Opening square bracket. I've finished my growth phase, she slows down to explain to me clearly. If you point me at the enemy, I can fight them. Quick grab on. I shift an antennae over in her direction, and the little tennis ball sized glob of dark rubber reaches up and latches on. She's still the same size as she was before. Are you sure? I ask. Positive, Master. Okay then. Here you go. I flick her into the air directly towards the onrushing beasts. Tiny watches as she sails over his head, tracing a graceful arc through the air. As she travels, something remarkable happens. She starts to grow. From a little tennis ball she expands. By the time she reaches the apex of her arc, she's inflated to basketball size, and as she descends she continues to become larger. Just before she vanishes into the crowd of monsters, the central sphere of her body unfolds and dozens of powerful, barbed tentacles appear surrounding a horrific, open maw. Dis gone be good. Almost giddy with anticipation, I skitter up the wall to get a better view of the action. Just in time too. Once that inflated ball vanished from sight, sunk into the middle of the onrushing horde, a few seconds passed and then chaos. Tentacles began flailing wildly as Krenis unleashes the true power of the jelly maw. Mowing down monsters like a scythe or gripping them, lifting them into the air and crushing them before they are tossed into that endless mouth. Monster after monster vanishes into Krenis's gullet, and she doesn't seem to change size at all. Whatever dimension they are traveling to, I hope their end is a peaceful one. The monsters do their best to fight back, slashing at her tentacles of dashing forward to bite at her. I'm sure they're doing damage, but I can't see it. At the rate she's eating them, she might just be healing it right back up anyway. Between myself and the shredding, Tiny stands quite still, squishing to death any monster that gets close enough or tries to slip past him. I think he might be enjoying the show just as much as I am. How is it going, Krenis? Do you need help? I inquire. No need, Master. You don't need to sully your mandibles with this trash. That's a bit harsh on them, isn't it? Releasing my domain spell, I start weaving a few gravity bolts and fling them into the fight whenever they're ready. Trying to do a little bit to ease the burden on my youngest pet, but it doesn't seem like she needs it. When it comes to cutting down weaker creatures like chaff, she is surely the most suitable out of herself and Tiny. The big ape is more specialized as a big hitter, though his new area lightning strike certainly helps him out in this department. This is why I chose to make Krenis my second pet. She counterbalances Tiny extremely well. Watching her shred through the endless waves of monsters is almost enough to bring a tear of pride to my eye. If she seems deadly now, just wait until she evolves. Her main disadvantage of not being able to see is totally irrelevant to her at the moment. No matter what direction she extends a limb, there is going to be an enemy there. Like a relentless machine, those tentacles reach out, snatch up a monster and crush it before snapping out to seize another victim. It's endless. In the end, I just leave the casting of the gravity bolts to my sub-brains and chill out on the wall. It's kind of nice to be so unneeded. Krenis, can you not eat so many? We could send some of that up to the queen. Oh, sorry, Master. I'll control myself. Thanks. Dot 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 dot. She really is a hungry thing, isn't she? Eventually Tiny gets bored and wades back into the fight, making sure to remain a minimum distance away from his fellow pet. He throws and slams monsters to his heart's content whilst I just continue to watch. So peaceful here in the dungeon. After another 20 minutes of monster splatting, there finally seems to be none left and we are able to spend some time picking through the battlefield. Looking at the heaped piles of monster remains, I try and estimate just how many there were in this ravenous swarm. The biomass is piled high even though Krenis probably ate almost 100 monsters on her own. Just where is her stomach? When I finally come up with a number, I feel a chill rush through my carapace. There must have been almost 1,000 of them. If Tiny and I hadn't evolved, if Krenis hadn't suddenly been able to fight, what would have happened to us if we tried to face down that many monsters? It's chilling to think about. I have so many questions now as a result of this. Why has this happened now? The Queen certainly never mentioned this sort of phenomenon, though it does seem reminiscent of what Enid told me happened back in Lyria. Are these monsters being controlled or threatened? Are they being chased out of their territory and sent up the dungeon? I'll have to answer these questions another time. First, we all eat until we are full, not that Krenis had any more space. I manage to gain 8 biomass, then I pick over the battlefield to find any monster cores using my mana sense whilst Tiny piles up a feed for the Queen over at the hidden entrance to our shortcut. I manage to find 20 cores amongst the wreckage, which I give to Krenis, who promptly sticks them into the multi-dimensional folds of her person and then shrinks herself back down to a tennis ball, which I place on my back. Dot 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 dot. Heavy. So damn heavy. She might be able to hide all that biomass, but she still carries the weight. Is everything alright, master? Says the innocent little murder blob on my back. My legs are shaking. I'm okay. I wheeze. Krenis was so awesome. Cheers, vibrant. Rushing over to her mini friend and rolling her about with her antennae. Look, let's take this food up to the surface and then do a check of the nearby tunnels. I want to make sure no monsters made it past us and up to the Queen's chamber. Okay. Chapter 188, Playing with Water. After delivering the biomass to the surface and marking it with pheromones so the colony will pick it up, we return back down to the entrance, making sure to conceal it once again. I feel good knowing that all of this biomass is going to bring the Queen closer to upgrading all of her egg production organs and laying the first generation of the new workers. For that happy occasion to come to pass, we need to work hard. Get to it, Anthony. Protect the colony. Kill the invaders. Once we get back down, we backtrack up the tunnel, check out the branching paths off this main tunnel. After 2 hours of meticulous searching, we come up with nothing. No tracks, no monsters, no nothing. It seems like that deadly wave of monsters only came up the tunnel we were in. It seems like too much of a coincidence to write off as luck. There must be something about this tunnel in particular. After resting briefly, I get Krenis to hop off briefly so I can stretch my legs. I decide that we will venture further down and explore this tunnel a little deeper. We aren't that far down here. If there is any serious action happening, it's surely going to be deeper than this. The 4 of us gird ourselves and begin to venture deeper into the dungeon. As we descend, I can really feel the difference in the mana. It's certainly more dense than it was when we fled the dungeon at the start of the wave, no doubt about it. I think the wave has clearly moved into a new phase as stronger monsters with longer gestation periods are forming in the walls now. On the one hand, it means they aren't popping out every few minutes, but on the other, it means a stronger fight when they are finally formed. All in all, it's slightly better than it was before, but not by much. Still, this change leads me to conclude that something weird is going on in the dungeon, and I don't like it. The monsters become tougher as we descend, even if they aren't necessarily a higher tier of creature. Something I've noticed during my time is that even creatures of the same species are often found lower down if they are a higher level. Perhaps it's a natural instinct of monsters to move lower the stronger they get. Certainly I have a good reason to be inside the dungeon, with my core draining until I die if I don't have access to the sweet mana. Whilst we travel, I start practicing the formation of the water mana transformation construct. It's far simpler than the mind magic one, so it doesn't take long for me to start making progress. I wonder if this is how human mages train. By repeatedly forming these constructs, they get good enough to form them at high speeds so they can cast spells. It makes sense, I suppose. I'm cheating in many ways, since rather than improve my mind through exercises and repeated practice, I simply upgraded my brain during the evolution process. This is the advantage of monster kind. This is my consolation for having to eat guts and bones all the time without any seasoning. I let Tiny resume his monster slapping role as we explore, filling in my tunnel map and tracing the side tunnels a ways when they appear. I wonder if there is an expanse down here somewhere. From what I've been told of the dungeon, they appear fairly regularly at various depths. The forest expanse was only unusual for how close it was to the surface. The various expanse are almost like the organs of the dungeon, the vital ecosystems that keep it running. The connecting tunnels are like the veins, allowing monsters and mana to flow between them. At least that's how the queen phrased it. It isn't really a question of is there an expanse down here somewhere, but where it is. It may be straight down or off to one side of us. No matter what, all main tunnels will eventually connect to an expanse, so as long as we trace them out we are going to find one. About 20 minutes later I finally succeed in forming my first water mana transformation construct. Woo! So much easier than the mind magic one. My upgraded brain has already succeeded. Perhaps this is the effect of the affinity skill as well. I can't wait to try out some spells. Eagerly I start feeding some raw mana into the construct and it begins to perform its intricate dance, working its special alchemy on the raw mana from my core until it finally emerges from the other end as shimmering blue water mana. So exciting. I leave on sub-brain in charge of holding the construct in place and task the other with feeding a constant stream of raw mana from my core into it whilst I take the mana and begin testing some of the known shapes to see what works. First, the bolt. Following much the same principles as the gravity bolt, I begin to use the mana to weave the familiar shape until a shimmering blue bolt is formed within my mind. Nice. Let's test this sucker. Fire. Whoosh. Filled with blue mana, a dense ball of water is formed that blasts forwards and impacts against a nearby rock formation where it explodes. Water flies everywhere and the stone partially crumbles under the impact of the pressurized water ball. Holy heck. So nice. Let's try the spear. I gather together a new mana thread and start trying to form the spear shape, but the spell doesn't seem to want to come together. The more I try and force it, the more it pushes back until the whole thing snaps and comes apart. Wah, why the heck did that fail? I try again, a bit irritated this time, but the same thing happens. I get to a point where the spell simply won't come together, and if I try to force it, then it just breaks and dissolves to nothing. Gah, let's put the spear aside for a moment and try something else. I could try the domain spell, I guess, but I don't want to use that much mana and exhaust my mind so randomly. What other shapes are there? I haven't looked at the others since I haven't really used them in so long. I flick through a few different spells in my mind before settling on one. This'll do. The shape I've chosen is similar to the spear but more open-ended, kind of like a cylinder within a cylinder, and both are engraved with elaborate patterns and signs. Not the worst thing I've ever seen. Let's give it a go. With my powerful main mind on the job, I work patiently through the process of forming the construct, and 10 minutes later it's finally complete. I may have had to remake a few parts, but for my first go that isn't too bad. Let's power it up and see what it does. Fire. Foom. A solid jet of water appears from above my head and blasts forward as if shot from a fire hose. Holy moly. The potent stream of water sends spray fountaining everywhere as it smashes into the wall of the tunnel. Ah, it's still drawing on my mana. Turn it off. Turn it off. So, a water cannon. Tiny is looking at me, irritated, dripping wet from the spray. Sorry about that, buddy. I wonder which other shapes will work. There are a few I still haven't tried, even with gravitational mana. Since my raw mana is being replenished quite rapidly through my feet, I may as well try an experiment. I think of the various shapes that have been implanted in my head when learning my magic-related skills and find one to my liking. This one is sort of a curved arc with a cloud-like base. I don't know why, but I feel like it will be impressive. It's a bit more difficult than the last one, so I take my time to carefully construct it as Tiny slaps to death the various monsters we come across. Eventually it's ready and I start powering it. The moment I do, I realize that this one is going to need quite a lot of juice before I can cast it. Tiny, come and stand behind me. The giant ape stops and immediately moves behind me, carefully positioning his lumbering form to avoid possible splashback. Still thinking about that Being careful, I continue to feed the water attribute mana into the spell as it comes out of my transformation construct, drawing the reserves in my core lower and lower. Just how much is this spell going to take? Aha! Ready at last. Eagerly I activate the spell and then stumble a little as the potent magic activates. With a colossal boom, water explodes out of the ground in front of me with a deafening roar and thunders down the tunnel in a mighty tidal wave. Stone pillars shatter and get washed away by the sheer kinetic force of the wave as it froths and foams forwards, eventually following the tunnel around a bend and out of sight. Dot dot dot. Then we hear a chorus of angry roars echoing back up the chamber towards us. Dot dot dot. Whoops. Chapter 189 The Croca Army. Looks like we might have hit something by mistake. Although, considering everything down that tunnel is sure to be hostile, I'm not sure I would call it a mistake. I wonder what I even hit with that wave. The mystery is soon solved when a gang of angry and damp-looking croca beasts come swaggering around the corner looking for trouble. So it's you guys. Are you the culprits chasing all the other monsters up the tunnel towards the surface just like Enid said, you damn thugs? Acting all tough now that your mama is in town, how sad is that? You stupid croc bipeds might have been scary and threatening when I was a hatchling, but you're small fry now. And it's true. The croca beasts that once upon a time loomed over me like giant croc-faced messengers of death don't seem nearly so large anymore. Whilst I'm not quite tall enough to look them in the eye, I probably have a similar overall mass to them since I'm much longer than I am tall. Their sharp claws and powerful, snapping jaws are not nearly as impressive as once they were. My own savage-infused mandibles look far more deadly, to be honest. These guys just don't hold any fear for me anymore. ROOOAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAA waiting for my orders. Tiny lumbers forward and starts smashing Croc face in with his massive fists. It's almost sad. He towers over the little Crocs and his fist is probably the same size as their entire head. With every swing he one-shots a Croca and it isn't long before the posse of toothy monsters has been smashed into paste. Good job, Tiny. Show 'em who's boss. The big ape slaps his chest and a wide grin appears on his bat face. This takes me back to when I first saw Tiny, battling against his rival, a massive Titan Croc. I get the feeling even after being reconstituted that he still has a special hatred for the Croc monsters. At the very least he seems inordinately pleased to have punched this particular group's faces in. Since they are unevolved monsters we don't even pause to eat them before proceeding down the still soggy tunnel. As I climb over the fallen Crocs I begin to sense something strange tickling at the edge of my awareness. Like a sound that I can't quite hear. Do you hear anything, Tiny? I ask. The ape tips his head to one side and listens for a moment before frowning and slowly nodding his head. So there is something. Be on guard, everyone, I advise before we continue to advance. With every step the faint feeling at the back of my mind grows more distinct. The pace of it increases so slow that I wouldn't have noticed at all if I wasn't watching for it. As it grows the sensation becomes more oppressive, threatening even. As we continue to travel I feel as if I'm being watched by a ravenous beast. Haga. Feel weird. I can tell Tiny feels it as well. He's been restless and smacking monsters with even more force than usual. Krenis, Vibrant, are you picking up on this feeling? Yup. The usually energetic Vibrant seems a little subdued under this pressure. I can, Master. Krenis too is feeling the pressure. Whatever is causing this, we need to be careful. We need to proceed with extra caution, team. I inform my crew, it's possible something really nasty is nearby that we can't necessarily defeat. I want everyone, including you, Tiny, to be prepared to run away if get into trouble. We'll flee back to the shortcut and make our escape from there. It goes to show how this mounting creepy feeling is weighing on us that even Tiny seems inclined to agree. Just to be sure I order him directly. Tiny, if I tell you to run, you will flee to the shortcut entrance. Got it. He reluctantly nods, his bat face pinched with a combination of distaste and unease. He doesn't have to like it, he just has to do it. No way I'm going to allow him to die charging headlong into some unwinnable fight. When we get right down to it he cannot deny a direct order from me, so I'm satisfied he'll be okay. The others are still riding on my back, so they'll probably end up where I do. I have to be careful not to leave Krenis behind. She has a very limited capacity to navigate her way around after all. Perhaps I should advise her to take tunnel sense and tunnel map. That'll give her a solid idea where to go without having to see after all. We continue to advance downwards, the monsters growing tougher with every step. More shadow monsters and the larger, more difficult beast types are becoming common. We even run into a few nasty plant types that are clearly evolved versions of the others we've seen and some others who are from a superior base species. A particularly nasty plant appears as a young tree, the first tree-looking plant monster I've seen. It attacks by swinging its branches but also seems capable of using earth magic. I didn't get a good look before Tiny crunched it to nothing with a two-handed slam. Still, It seems as if the plant-type monsters are still spawning in this part of the dungeon. Something odd seems to be going on with the monsters we come across though. For starters, there are far less of them. Ever since that formless pressure begun to weigh on us, the number of monsters we've seen active in the tunnels has gone way down. Secondly, we notice that there are quite a few monsters moving away from us and down the tunnels. Every now and again we catch glimpses of newly spawned creatures shifting along the walls and vanishing down the tunnels. Where are they going? Is there some sort of party that we aren't invited to? I'd love to chase after these shadows, but with the invisible weight pressing down on me, I simply don't have the confidence to be rushing around corners blindly. For the first time in a while, I'm starting to feel real, actual fear. If this is a monster causing this pressure, when I can't even see it, just how powerful would that creature need to be? Is it Geros itself? I thought that Croc was meant to be over in Lyria. That's like a week away over the surface. What would it be doing here? To be honest, if I actually thought that the parent of all these Croc monsters was kicking around down here, I'd rush straight back up to the surface immediately. I don't see any reason for Geros to be around here, so I'm prepared to proceed, but cautiously. So we do, creeping forward very slowly. The tunnel continues to wind its way deeper into the ground. As we proceed, the tunnel grows wider, and I notice that other branching tunnels are coming together here. It feels as if we are getting close to something. We make better progress than I expected considering our careful pace due to the lack of monsters in our path. It's almost unnerving to see the tunnels this deserted during the wave. I know the monsters are still being formed in the walls, I can sense them. They are just rushing off somewhere the moment they come out. Eventually, I estimate about 10 kilometers down according to tunnel map, the passage opens up and a strange light illuminates the rocks ahead of us. Is it an expanse? The pressure is crushing now, as if death waits for us after every step. Vibrant is extremely nervous, clinging fiercely to my head and shivering in place. As we step forward, the tunnel walls slowly drop away and a vast, open underground space appears before us. Dark swampland stretches as far as my eyes can see, mist-covered marshes studded with drooping trees and vibrant, vine-shrouded flowers. And crocs. So many crocs. Chapter 190, The Marsh Expanse. Are there gods in Pangera? Scholarship in this area has been largely suppressed since the Church of the Path rose to predominance. Their inquisitors have been most active in their pursuit of those willing to explore this scholastic line of inquiry. Despite their efforts through the centuries, there has been a small but industrious cadre of truth seekers who are keen to bring the light of wisdom to our own history. Records do indeed suggest that there were numerous religions in the time before the descent, when the system changed our very understanding of the world. In many lands and across many races, there was a wide variety of ways in which people practiced faith-based organizations. Whether those divinities were real or imagined is hard to determine now, since only a smattering of writings from that time remain, and no doubt these religious organizations were shattered during the cataclysm and then purged by the surging Church of the Path. There have been curious reports from those who have pressed deep into the world below that they have at times felt the presence of an otherworldly spirit, a powerful feeling of reverence. Other writings which the Church attempted to suppress have been unearthed, detailing the experiences of those who claim to have actually met divine beings within the dungeon, come face to face with them, even spoken to them. Whether such tales can be taken seriously or not is difficult to say. At depths such as these, where the mana saturation is at suffocating levels, the mind has been known to play tricks. It can also be speculated that such creatures may well have been highly intelligent and powerful monsters. Though some would argue there is little difference between a supremely powerful monster and a god, that way lies the true heresy. Those mortals who fell into the worship of the beasts who ravaged this world during the rending were exorcised from society at its conclusion, and their monster worship most likely ended with them. The banned writings of Giovanni the Faithless, from the secret library of the Path. Dash 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 dash. Throughout the marshes and on the humps of land that rise up out of the murky waters, there are croca beasts at various stages of evolution almost everywhere, including a number of varieties I haven't seen before. Some of them are freakin' massive, hulking brutes of creatures that look like they seriously mean business. What really hits me, the most intimidating thing, is that the invisible pressure I've been feeling has skyrocketed the moment we laid eyes on this expanse. Holy moly. I feel like something has a knife at my neck, except that I don't have a neck. I can't see anything that might be the cause of this feeling, but I'm sure. Somewhere in this expanse there is a truly frightening monster. I can see other tunnel entrances to this expanse nearby, and periodically a monster will emerge and head immediately deeper into the expanse. The crocs don't attack them. Curiously, the plants don't seem to either. It's as if this entire ecosystem of monsters is being suppressed by something, not obeying their own monstrous instincts to hunt and fight in the endless pursuit of prey. It can only be whatever is creating this oppressive aura. I personally don't feel any desire to rush into the expanse and high-five the beast creating this pressure, quite the opposite, but clearly, it's having some effect on the other monsters here. Perhaps this is the source of the wave of monsters we battled in the tunnels. Are the monsters being gathered here and then sent out in huge packs to brutalize the surface and other creatures? For what purpose? For what design? Purely for destruction's sake or for something more? I mean, if I were a giant crocodile monster, centuries old and filled with an endless hunger to produce tiny crocs, what would I do? I mean, eat. Come on, Anthony. You can do better than this. Think. Think like a croc. Grr. Gra. How am I supposed to know what a stupid croc thinks like? I never had pet reptiles, damn it. Let's just go with the mindless massacre scenario. They are sending out waves of murderous monsters in order to kill stuff because Geros is mad at the world or something. There. The real question is, what are we going to do about it? We've found a huge, juicy expanse here, placed relatively nicely for the colony to exploit. If I can connect up the shortcut to this area, then it'll be a relatively short trip for the workers to take advantage of the resources here. Only problem being that some huge murderous beast is sitting in there somewhere creating this aura of death. I really don't want to charge headlong into this place. So we compromise. We still have a day before we are expected back on the surface. There is plenty that we can do in the meantime without rushing headlong to our deaths. If there is something that Tiny is reluctant to fight, then I'm all about avoiding that thing. I'd like to get a visual of it so that I know what I'm dealing with, but I feel like getting that close is going to take some effort. Let the work begin. We happily back out of the expanse and busily get to work constructing a new shortcut that will connect to our already existing sneaky tunnel. What better way to relax the mind that has become tense under formless pressure than by indulging in the fantastic world of Ant Zen? Digging is truth. Truth is digging. We make incredibly quick progress, even though we need to make the tunnel larger due to Tiny's massive size. The reason is all thanks to Krenis. Now that she's fully grown, she's more than capable of helping. Where she excels isn't really in the digging of the dirt, but in shoving the loose soil down the tunnel and out the entrance. By unleashing the power of her tentacles, she can shift huge amounts of dirt at a time, and since the tunnel is so easy to navigate, she can't get lost moving back and forth. This allows me so much more time to get my hands into the dirt that we are flying through it. It's so nice when the team comes together. Every now and again we take a break and try to lure creatures out of the expanse and into the tunnels to fight us. Every time a group of crocs walk past, I get Tiny to throw a rock at them. Trusty Pebble, you worked hard for me in Yarnham, and you perform your function here as well. When the croca beasts notice they are being pelted with stones from a tunnel, they predictably get mad and charge into the tunnel angrily, whereupon we descend on them with furious vengeance and snuff them out before engaging in vigorous snacking. It only takes a few times doing this before the wandering groups of crocs aren't coming past our tunnel anymore, and we have to start creeping a little further into the expanse to find monsters to lure.